Drop the leashes! He stood in her way, hand on his radio, eyes on her like she didn't belong here. The two dogs pulled tight against their leashes, no barking, no retreating, no one moved. And in that moment, he had no idea. He'd just aimed his badge at the wrong woman. The morning was quiet. Birds, a distant lawn-mower, the soft rhythm of sneakers on pavement. Joy ran the same route every Tuesday past the old hardware store, past the community garden, down the long stretch of Callaway Street where the sidewalk cracked near the fire hydrant and the oak trees made a ceiling of shade. Zeus stayed on her left, Ares on her right, both silent, both steady. She wasn't thinking about anything in particular. That was the point. She heard them before she saw them. 2 engines. Then tires cutting hard across pavement. Then the sound of doors not slamming, but closing with that specific weight that police cruisers carry. She slowed. 2 patrol cars sat diagonal across the mouth of the parking lot, blocking the path completely. Not parked, positioned. A man stepped out of the first car, Sergeant Orser. He didn't look at the dogs first. He looked at her, top to bottom. Slow, like he was reading something he'd already decided he didn't like. He was broad across the shoulders, mid-50s, with the kind of face that had stopped asking questions a long time ago. His uniform was pressed. His badge caught the morning light for just a second. He didn't say good morning. Those animals need to be leashed and registered. His voice landed flat, like a door closing. I'm going to need to see documentation. Right now. Joy stopped walking. Zeus and Ares stopped with her. She looked at him. Then at the second officer, Davidson, who had moved to the right without being asked, positioning himself between her and the street. Quiet. Practiced. They are leashed, Joy said. Her voice was calm. Not soft. Calm. Orser's eyes moved to the leashes and then back to her face with something that wasn't quite a smile. Those don't look regulation to me. She didn't answer that. He took 1 step forward, just 1. But it was the kind of step that shrinks a space, that makes a sidewalk feel like a hallway with no exit. You run here often? He asked. His tone had shifted. Less official now. More something else. Yes, she said. Funny. He tilted his head. Don't think I've seen you before. The way he said it wasn't curious. It was a door closing on a different kind of question, the kind that doesn't need an answer because it's already made its point. You don't belong here. A woman across the street had stopped walking. Older, white hair, a small dog on a leash. She watched for a moment, then looked away and kept moving. A car slowed near the corner, then drove on. No one stopped. No one said anything. Davidson hadn't moved. He stood with his thumbs hooked near his belt, watching Joy the way people watch something they've already decided is a problem. Orser pulled out a small notepad, clicked his pen once. Name. Not can I get your name. Not ma'am. Just name. Joy gave it. He wrote slowly, like the act of writing it down was itself a kind of ownership. And these animals? He nodded toward Zeus and Ares without looking at them directly. What breed? Belgian Malinois. A pause. Both of them? Yes. He clicked his pen again, looked up. Those are working dogs. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation wearing the shape of one. Yes, she said again. Working for who? She held his gaze. I can provide documentation. I didn't ask about documentation. His voice dropped just slightly. I asked who they work for. Ares shifted his weight, just slightly. A small adjustment, barely visible, but Orser noticed. His hand moved not to his weapon, but to his radio. A reflex. Automatic, and in that half-second, something passed across his face. Not fear, not yet, but something adjacent to it. He covered it fast, straightened, let the professional mask slide back into place. "You're going to want to get those animals under control," he said. Loud enough now. Loud enough for the street. Joy didn't move. Neither did Zeus. Neither did Ares. And then from somewhere behind the second patrol car, where Joy hadn't been looking, she heard it. A radio. Not Orser's. Not Davidson's. Someone else's. Already on. Already talking. She didn't turn to look, but she heard 3 words before the volume dropped. "She's the one," then static, then nothing. Orser's expression didn't change, but his pen had stopped moving. Orser took one more step, not aggressive, not rushed, just forward. The kind of step that doesn't announce itself but changes everything. The space between them shrank from 6 feet to 4. Still legal. Still professional. But different. Joy didn't step back. He noticed that something moved behind his eyes. Not anger. Not yet, but a recalibration. Like a man who had expected a door to open and found it locked instead. Behind her, Davidson had drifted right. She hadn't watched him do it. She hadn't needed to. She'd felt the shift in the air, the way the geometry of the situation changed. 3 points on a triangle now, the fence at her back, the first cruiser on her left, Davidson sealing the right side without a word, without a signal. Like this was a routine they had run before. "I'm going to be straightforward with you," Orser said. His voice had found a new register, lower, steadier. The voice of someone explaining something obvious to someone who should already know it. "Those animals represent a public safety threat. That's not my opinion. That's a designation under Municipal Code 714B. He paused. "You familiar with that code?" Joy said nothing. "It gives me the authority to detain the animals pending a full assessment," he continued, "for the safety of the community." The words were clean, organized, the kind of language that sounds like policy but functions like a wall. Words that don't leave room for argument because they've already framed the argument as unreasonable. "On what basis?" Joy said. "I just told you the basis." "You cited a code. You didn't establish a basis." Her voice stayed even. "These animals are leashed, under control, and licensed. What specific behavior are you responding to?" A beat of silence. Orser smiled, not warmly. "You always talk like that on a Tuesday morning." Davidson made a sound. Not quite a laugh. Somewhere just below 1. From inside the second cruiser, a door opened. A third officer stepped out younger, staying near the car, one hand resting on the roof. He had a tablet in his other hand. He glanced at it once, then back at Joy. He didn't introduce himself. Orser didn't introduce him either. "Here's what's going to happen," Orser said. His voice had gone quieter, which made it heavier. "You're going to hand me those leashes. My colleague is going to document the animals, and then we're going to sort out whether you have the paperwork to support your claim that these are working dogs. I've already offered documentation, and I'll look at it after." He held out his hand. Palm up. Patient. Zeus made no sound, but he shifted his weight forward barely, almost nothing, and his shoulders dropped a half-inch, the way they did when he moved from passive alert to something else. Orser's open hand didn't move, but his eyes went to Zeus. Just for a second. Joy looked at the fence behind her. 8 feet of chain link, no gate on this side. She looked at Davidson, still positioned to her right. She looked at the third officer by the cruiser, still holding his tablet. She had seen this kind of architecture before, not here. Not in a parking lot on a Tuesday morning, but in other places where the goal was never really the stated goal. The question was whether she would hand over the leashes. Because if she handed over the leashes, something else transferred with them. Something that didn't have a name in Municipal Code 714B, but that everyone present understood. She looked back at Orser. His hand was still out. "I want to be clear," she said quietly, "about what I'm being asked to do. It's simple," he said. "The leashes. I understand what you're asking." She held his gaze. "I want you to understand that I understand." Something shifted in his face. The third officer stopped looking at his tablet. Davidson went very still. The morning had gone completely quiet. Even the birds. Orser waited. His hand was still out. The morning held its breath around them, and Joy stood exactly where she had been standing. Leashes in both hands, eyes on his face, not defiant, not frightened, just present. Still, like someone who had been in rooms like this before and had learned that stillness was its own kind of answer. He didn't get what he expected. That was the problem. Davidson shifted his weight, a small movement, barely visible, but Joy caught it. 3 minutes had passed since Orser had first extended his hand. In her experience, 3 minutes was a long time for a man like him to wait. Most people handed things over before the first minute was up. Most people filled the silence with apology, with explanation, with the anxious need to make the discomfort stop. Joy did none of those things. "I'd like to provide my documentation first," she said. Same voice as before, measured, clear. "I have federal handler certification, current registration for both animals, and their service records. All of it is in order." She paused. "I'd like that on record before anything changes hands." Orser lowered his hand. Slowly. Not a concession, a repositioning. "You're not being detained," he said. "This is a voluntary compliance situation." "Then I'm voluntarily providing documentation," Joy said. "Before voluntary compliance." A beat. The third officer by the cruiser glanced up from his tablet. Davidson looked at Orser. Orser looked at Joy with the expression of a man trying to locate the edge of something he couldn't quite see. She reached slowly into the small, zippered pocket of her running jacket, slowly enough that every movement was visible, deliberate, readable. She pulled out a folded card government issue, laminated, the kind that doesn't come from a pet store or a county clerk's office. She held it out. Not to Orser, to the space between them. Neutral ground. He took it, looked at it for 3 seconds. His face gave nothing away, but his thumb moved across the surface of the card the way fingers do when they're buying time. He handed it to the third officer without looking at him. The third officer looked at it, then looked at his tablet, then looked at the card again. Nobody said anything. "This covers both animals?" Orser asked. "There's a second card." Joy produced it the same way, same pace, same steadiness. "Zeus, Ares, both current, both federal." Orser took the second card. He held both of them now, one in each hand, and for just a moment he looked like a man holding something he hadn't planned to be holding. He passed them both to the third officer and turned back to Joy. "Where'd you train?" he said. Not a question. A test. "Fort Bragg, then a federal contractor program out of Virginia." She said it the way she might say the name of a street. Factual, unremarkable. "I can provide the contact information for my certifying agency if that would help move this forward." The third officer had stopped pretending to look at his tablet. He was looking at Joy now, openly, with an expression that had moved past professional neutral into something more complicated. Davidson still hadn't moved from his position to the right, but his weight had shifted back slightly, almost imperceptibly. Almost. Orser clasped his hands in front of him. The code I cited applies regardless of federal certification, he said. Municipal jurisdiction isn't superseded by, I know what supersedes what, Joy said. Quiet, not loud, not sharp, just 5 words, delivered without heat, that landed in the middle of his sentence and stopped it cold. The third officer looked down. Davidson looked at the fence. A bird started somewhere in the oak trees above the parking lot, and then went silent again, like it had thought better of it. Orser looked at her for a long moment. The professional mask was still in place, but something behind it was working harder now, recalculating, searching for the script that matched this particular situation. He had run this kind of stop before. He knew how it went. There was a shape to it, a sequence, and the sequence required the other person to fill certain roles at certain times. Joy was not filling her role. He took a slow breath through his nose. I still need you to hand over the leashes while we complete the assessment. I understand that's what you need, Joy said. I want to make sure my documentation is logged first, by your body camera. She looked directly at the small black device mounted on his chest. Is it on? Orser said nothing. Joy waited. And then, without a word, without any change in his expression, Orser reached up and pressed the button on his camera. A small red light blinked on. He lowered his hand, looked at her, said nothing, but his jaw had tightened, just slightly, just enough. Joy unclipped Zeus's leash from her left hand, held it out, and said, quietly, almost gently, I want the timestamp noted. It happened fast, and then it happened slowly. Orser reached for his radio, not to speak into it, just reached, the way a man reaches for something familiar when a situation starts moving in a direction he didn't plan for. His hand went to his shoulder, fingers closing around the device, and that was all it took. Zeus moved first, then Ares, not attack, not chaos. They surged forward to the exact length of their leashes and stopped there, a perfect line, shoulders level, heads low, bodies coiled into something that was less animal and more architecture, a wall, a boundary drawn in muscle and silence. The sound that came from them was not barking. It was lower than that, older than that. The kind of sound that doesn't need translation because it speaks directly to something beneath language, beneath thought, beneath the part of the brain that knows how to be professional. Both officers froze. Davidson's hand went to his belt. He didn't draw. He didn't speak. His body just stopped, the way bodies stop when they receive information faster than the mind can process it. The third officer by the cruiser took one step back without appearing to decide to. His tablet was at his side now, forgotten. Orser had gone very still. His hand was still on the radio, but he wasn't pressing anything. Joy said one word, quiet, flat. Sit. Both dogs dropped immediately. Weight back, haunches down, heads still low, eyes still forward. The sound stopped. The wall remained not in posture anymore, but in the air, in the space between them, in the way the morning had suddenly rearranged itself around a new fact. Nobody moved for 3 full seconds. Then Davidson exhaled. A long, slow breath he probably didn't know he'd been holding. The third officer looked at his own hand, seemed surprised to find it empty, and picked his tablet back up without looking at the screen. Orser lowered his hand from the radio. Carefully, like a man stepping back from a ledge he hadn't meant to approach. You need to control those animals, he said. His voice was steady, professionally steady. The kind of steady that requires effort. They are controlled, Joy said. And they were perfectly, completely. in a way that a person who knew dogs understood immediately, and a person who didn't couldn't quite articulate but felt regardless the difference between an animal that is restrained and an animal that is disciplined. The leashes hadn't snapped taut. Joy hadn't moved. She hadn't raised her voice or shifted her weight or done anything at all except say one word. And the word had been enough. Orser looked at Zeus, then at Ares. Then, for the first time since this had started, he looked at Joy differently. Not with contempt, not with the flat authority of someone running a routine stop, with something more careful, more considered. The third officer had been looking at his tablet for the last 30 seconds. Now he spoke for the first time. His voice was younger than his face, slightly uncertain at the edges. "Sergeant." He didn't say anything else. Just the rank. But the way he said it carried a question. Orser didn't look at him. "What?" "The certification number on the second card." A pause. "I ran it." Orser waited. "It's—" The officer stopped, looked at Joy, looked back at Orser, lowered his voice, though not enough. "It's a federal contractor designation, K9 unit. The issuing agency is—" He turned the tablet around slightly, as if Orser needed to see it to believe it. "It's not local." Silence. Davidson had turned his head, not his body, just his head, slowly, toward the third officer and the tablet. "What agency?" Orser said. The third officer looked at the screen again, said the name quietly. 2 words, an acronym Joy recognized immediately, one that Orser clearly recognized too, because something changed in the set of his shoulders, a very small change, a tightening, the kind that happens when a man realizes the perimeter he thought he controlled extends further than he mapped. He turned back to Joy. She hadn't moved, hadn't reacted. She was looking at him with the same steady patience she had maintained since the beginning, since the 2 cruisers had pulled diagonal across the parking lot, and she had slowed her run, and the morning had stopped being ordinary. "How long have you been running this route?" he asked. His voice was different now, quieter. The official register was still there, but something underneath it had shifted. 14 months, Joy said. He nodded once. Slowly, like a man filing something away. Behind him. The third officer had turned his tablet face down against his thigh, and from somewhere down the block from the direction Joy had come, from the street she ran every Tuesday, from the ordinary world that existed before the cruisers had positioned themselves across her path, a car turned the corner and slowed. Dark, no markings, tinted windows. It didn't stop. It didn't speed up. It moved past at a pace that was just slightly too measured to be coincidence. And then it was gone. Davidson watched it go, said nothing. But his hand had come off his belt entirely, and he did not put it back. Orser looked at the tablet one more time, then at Joy, then at the dogs. He made a decision. Joy could see him making it, not in his face, which stayed composed, but in the small sequence of adjustments that preceded it. A breath, a shift of weight, the hand that had been near his radio moving to his side instead. The decision of a man who had just recalculated and was choosing, for now, to proceed carefully. "I'm going to need to make a call," he said. "Take your time," Joy said. He stepped back. 2 steps, enough distance to lower his voice. He turned slightly away and spoke into his radio. Quiet enough that the words didn't carry. Davidson stayed where he was. The third officer had not moved from his position near the cruiser, but he was no longer watching Joy. He was watching Orser. Joy waited. Zeus and Ares sat exactly where she had put them. Still, patient. The morning had warmed slightly. The sun had cleared the oak trees and was cutting low across the parking lot, throwing long shadows from the cruisers across the pavement. Somewhere down the block, a sprinkler came on. The sound of it was almost absurd in its ordinariness. Orser finished his call. He stood with his back still partially turned for a moment, long enough to be noticeable, before he turned around. "Can I see the full documentation?" he said. "Everything you have?" Not a demand this time. A request. The grammar of it was different. Joy heard the difference. Davidson heard it too. She could tell from the way his chin lifted slightly. A small recalibration of his own. Joy unzipped the second pocket of her running jacket. This one was deeper. She removed a folded envelope standard letter size, slightly worn at the creases from being carried, clearly not something she had assembled this morning. She held it out. Orser took it, opened it. Inside were 3 documents. He looked at the first one for a long time, then the second. The third he held closer, tilting it slightly toward the light, and Joy watched his eyes move across it the way eyes move when they are reading something twice, because the first time didn't produce the expected result. He handed it to the third officer without a word. The third officer read it. His expression went through 3 changes in the space of about 4 seconds. Attention. Recognition. And then something that wasn't quite discomfort but was close to it. He handed it back to Orser without being asked. "This is a current authorization," Orser said. It was not a question. It was a man reading a fact out loud in order to hear himself accept it. "Yes," Joy said. "Renewed 6 weeks ago. And the animals are listed individually. By name, by designation, by handler." She paused. "That's me." Orser folded the documents carefully. He did not hand them back immediately. He held them, looking at the parking lot somewhere to Joy's left, at nothing in particular, for a moment that stretched just long enough to become significant. Davidson spoke for the first time in several minutes. "Sarge." One word. Low. A check-in, or a warning, or both. Orser handed the documents back. Joy took them, folded them, returned them to the envelope, and put the envelope back in her pocket. All of it unhurried, all of it quiet. The designation on that third document. The third officer said. He was looking at Orser, not at Joy, but the words were for the space between all of them. "That's not something you can—" He stopped, chose different words. "That's not a local certification." "No," Joy said. "It isn't. That level of authorization—" He paused again. "That requires a federal sponsor." Joy said nothing. She didn't need to. The third officer looked at Zeus, then at Ares. He was seeing them differently now, she could tell from the way his gaze had changed. No longer cataloging threat, but recategorizing entirely. The way you look at an object when you realize it belongs to a different classification than the one you assigned it. He was a young man who had presumably been told what this stop was before he arrived. He was now standing in the gap between what he'd been told and what the document said, and it was not a comfortable place to stand. Orser clasped his hands in front of him again, the gesture from before, but it meant something different now. Before, it had been control. Now it was containment. A man holding himself together while he thought through something he hadn't anticipated needing to think through. "Is there a reason," he said slowly, "that you're running this particular route, at this particular time?" Joy looked at him. "I run it every Tuesday," she said. "I've told you that. I know what you told me. Then you know the answer." Another silence. The sprinkler down the block cycled off. A truck passed on the main road, and for a moment its engine filled the quiet, and then it faded, and the quiet came back, heavier than before. Orser looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Not the recalibration from before, not the careful professionalism, but something older and less managed. Something that looked, just briefly, like the beginning of concern. "You should probably finish your run," he said. Joy looked at him, then at Davidson, then at the third officer, who was looking at the ground. She reached down and unclipped Zeus's leash from the anchor point, checked Ares's in one smooth motion, and straightened. "Yes," she said. "I should—" She started walking, not running. Walking. Past the cruiser on her left, through the space where the two cars had blocked the path, back onto the sidewalk where the oak trees made their ceiling of shade. Zeus on her left, Ares on her right, their paws finding the pavement again in that quiet, synchronized rhythm. She did not look back, but behind her, she heard Orser's voice. Low, directed at the third officer, clipped and tight. "Pull everything you have on that authorization. Everything. And don't log this stop yet." She kept walking. And she counted her steps, slowly, all the way to the corner. The video appeared online at 11:14 a.m. Joy hadn't posted it. She hadn't known it existed until her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. No name, no context, just a link and 3 words thought you'd want. She clicked it at her kitchen table, still in her running clothes, a glass of water in her hand. 47 seconds of footage, shaky but clear, shot from across the street, through the gap between 2 parked cars, at the angle of someone who had stopped walking and quietly decided to document what they were seeing. It showed Orser. It showed Davidson. It showed the diagonal cruisers and the blocked path and the third officer with his tablet. It showed Joy standing still, leashes in both hands, while Orser's hand rested on his radio. And it showed Zeus and Ares the moment they moved, the wall they made, and then the single word that brought them back. The comment section was already moving by the time she closed the link. By noon, it had 40,000 views. By 2 o'clock, 3 times that. The story had found its shape in the way these things do fast, partial, emotionally legible. Black woman harassed during morning run, military dogs, federal certification, 2 officers. The framing wasn't wrong, exactly. But it was incomplete in ways that made Joy uncomfortable, because incomplete things have a way of becoming something else before you can correct them. She didn't post anything. She didn't comment. She put her phone face down on the table and sat with it for a while. The letter arrived at 4:47 p. Hand delivered. A young man in a plain gray shirt, no markings, who rang the bell once and was back in his car before Joy had finished reading the return address on the envelope. She stood in her doorway and looked at it for a moment before she opened it. It was a civil filing. 17 pages. The language was dense and formal and very deliberate, the kind of document that takes time to prepare, the kind that doesn't get drafted in an afternoon. Someone had been working on this before the video went up. Before the morning, possibly before Tuesday at all. The filing named her. It named Zeus and Ares individually. It cited Municipal Code 714B, the same code Orser had quoted on the sidewalk, and 3 additional statutes she recognized and 2 she didn't. It claimed property damage, emotional distress, and threat of bodily harm. It requested a court order for the immediate removal and quarantine of both animals pending behavioral assessment. Pending assessment was a phrase that meant something specific in this context. Joy had seen it used before. It was a holding pattern that could last weeks or months, during which the animals in question were housed in facilities that were not designed for dogs like Zeus and Ares. dogs trained to a specific handler, dogs for whom separation was not neutral but actively harmful. It was a slow way to break something. Legal, documented, nearly impossible to oppose quickly. At the bottom of the last page, in the space for the filing party's representative, was a name she didn't recognize. A law firm, downtown address. The kind of firm that didn't take cases like this, minor civil disputes, neighborhood complaints, unless someone with resources had asked them to. She read the name twice. Then she went inside and closed the door. Her phone had been buzzing continuously for 2 hours. She turned the volume off and set it on the counter. Through the front window, she could see a car parked across the street that had not been there this morning. Not the dark, unmarked one from the parking lot. A different car, lighter color, but parked at the same measured distance, positioned at the same angle. Zeus was at her left side. Aries was near the back door. Neither of them was agitated, but neither of them had settled into rest. Either they were in the middle state, the watchful state, the one that meant they were reading the room and waiting for information. She sat down at the kitchen table, placed the filing in front of her, placed her phone beside it, face down, placed her hands flat on the table, palms down, and looked at the wall for a moment, the way she had learned to look at things when she needed to think without feeling just geometry, just facts, just the shape of what was actually there. The filing was not a response to the video. The filing was a message. It was Orser, or whoever was behind Orser, saying, "We see you, and we have more tools than you think." What they didn't know, and what Joy had not yet decided whether to show them, was that she had been counting tools since the moment the two cruisers pulled diagonal across the parking lot, since the first step forward, since the radio, since She's the One and the static and the pen that had stopped moving. She had been counting, and the number was not small. Her phone buzzed once more. She turned it over. A different number this time. A name she recognized. Someone she had not spoken to in 3 years, from a chapter of her life that existed in a different context entirely, in a language that people like Orser did not speak and would not recognize. The message was 4 words. I saw the video. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she picked up the phone and typed back 2 I know. She set the phone down, looked at the filing, looked at Zeus. He was watching her with the particular attention he reserved for moments when the situation was unclear and he was waiting for direction. She gave him none yet. But she picked up a pen, and she started reading from the beginning. By Wednesday morning, the video had 340,000 views. Joy knew this because her neighbor Marcus told her. He knocked at 7:15, holding 2 coffees and his phone, and stood on her porch with the expression of a man who had been awake since 5, processing something he didn't quite know how to hand over. He was 63, retired, former city planner. He had lived across the street for 11 years. He was not a man who knocked on doors at 7:15. "You need to see what's in the comments," he said. She let him in. Zeus and Aries assessed him briefly and returned to their positions. He sat at her kitchen table and scrolled while she stood beside him with her coffee, and read over his shoulder. It was not the view count that mattered. It was the pattern. The comments had started the way they always did, reaction. Outrage, the fast language of people responding to an image before they had context. But somewhere around hour 6, something shifted. People had stopped reacting and started recognizing. Short messages, plainly written, from accounts that had no reason to know each other. "This happened to me on Calloway Street last spring." And further down, same officer, same parking lot. "He told me my dog was a threat. My dog is a beagle." And then another, Posted at 2 a.m. He did this to my son in March. We didn't have a video. I've been thinking about that ever since. Marcus had compiled them. Printed them 12 pages, single-spaced, organized by date. He set the stack on the table beside Joy's pen and the civil filing. There are 14 separate incidents, he said. Just from people willing to say something publicly. He paused. I think there are more. Joy looked at the stack. How long did this take you? Most of the night, he said. I used to do land use analysis. Pattern documentation isn't that different. Across town, in a break room on the 4th floor of a building marked Community Advocacy Center, a woman named Renata was showing the video to 3 colleagues. Renata was 41, a civil rights attorney, with the particular stillness of someone who had been doing this work long enough to recognize a thing quickly. She watched the 47 seconds without speaking, then watched it again. The dogs are federally certified, said the man to her left. I know, Renata said, and she asked him to confirm his body camera was on before handing over the leash. That's not something most people think to do. No, Renata said. They don't. She closed the laptop. Find out who she is. Don't call her yet. Just find out. The third message came from a woman named Sylvia, age 71, who had lived on Calloway Street for 34 years. She sent it through the Neighborhood Association's online form at 6 a.m. in the careful grammar of someone who had composed it several times before sending. I have a security camera on my porch that covers the street. I have footage from March, April, and twice in the summer. I kept it because I didn't know what else to do with it. If someone wants to see it. I am home most mornings. Joy read it twice. Do you know Sylvia on the 400 block? Sylvia Greer, Marcus said immediately. She's been there longer than anyone. Joy folded the message. I'd like to visit her this morning. Sylvia opened the door before Joy had finished knocking. She was a small woman with close-cut white hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. I saw the video, she said. Recognized the parking lot right away. She stepped back to let Joy in. I've got 4 months of footage. I never deleted any of it because... She stopped, looked at Zeus, looked back at Joy. I don't know why I kept it. Exactly. I just felt like I should... Joy pulled a chair close to the small desk where Sylvia's laptop sat open. Zeus settled at her feet. On the screen, 4 months of ordinary Tuesday mornings began to play. Each one was the same street. Each one was a different person. Each one was Orser. Joy watched without speaking. After the 3rd clip, she took out her pen. After the 5th, she opened her notebook. By the 8th, her handwriting had gone very small and very precise, the way it did when she was no longer observing and had started, quietly, to build something, outside. A car slowed on Calloway Street. Neither of them looked up. Joy cleared the kitchen table at 9 o'clock that night, civil filing on the left, Marcus's pages on the right, Sylvia's USB drive in the center. She made coffee, turned off the overhead light, turned on the small lamp in the corner. Zeus was under the table, Aries near the back door. Both quiet, both there. She opened her notebook and drew a single horizontal line across the top of a fresh page. Beneath it, she wrote one-word timeline. Then she started from the beginning, not from Tuesday, but from as far back as the evidence allowed and worked forward. March 4th. Sylvia's footage, a man walking a retriever on Calloway, stopped by a single cruiser, Orser on foot, no partner visible, 11 minutes. The man left without the dog. She wrote that down. Date, duration, outcome, one line, March 19th. A woman with a stroller and a small dog. Orser again. 4 minutes. The woman left with the dog, but stood on the sidewalk afterward for a long time before she finally walked away. One line. She moved through the footage methodically, watching each clip twice, once for the broad shape, once for the details. She noted positions. She wrote down every time Orser's hand went to his radio. She noted which stops had a second officer. She noted time of day, which clustered between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., and day of week, which skewed toward Tuesday and Thursday. By 11 o'clock, she had 19 entries. 3 of them she flagged with a small asterisk stops where the dog had not come home. She looked at those 3 for a long time. Garrett called at midnight. No greeting. The certification number on your handler documents, the issuing agency. A pause. Someone flagged your file 8 weeks ago. Access request. Someone pulled your service record, just the K9 sections, the federal contractor designation. Another pause. It was an informal request, the kind that requires someone on the inside. Joy looked at her timeline. 8 weeks ago was the first week of September. The earliest entry on Sylvia's footage was March. Marcus's oldest compiled comment was 11 months back. How far back does the pattern go? Garrett said. It wasn't a question he was asking her. At least 11 months, Joy said. Silence on the line. Then the file pull wasn't the beginning, he said slowly. It was a confirmation. Someone already knew about you. They were verifying something they thought they already had. He stopped. Joy, do you know why you specifically? She looked at the 3 asterisked entries. She looked at the civil filing. At the name of the law firm at the bottom of the last page, the name she hadn't recognized 2 nights ago, but had looked up that afternoon. The firm had one major client on retainer. A municipal contractor, a company holding service agreements with the city's animal control division. A company that had, 14 months ago, submitted a bid for a new federal K9 contract worth just over $4 million. A contract awarded instead to the Federal Handler Program that had issued Joy's certification. She looked at that entry in her notes for a long moment. I think I know why, she said. The article appeared Thursday morning at 6 a.m., a local news site, mid-sized. The headline was careful not false, but built from a specific selection of true things arranged to produce a particular impression. Questions raised about federal K9. Handler following viral confrontation. It cited unnamed sources. It referenced 2 paragraphs from an incident report filed during a training exercise 3 years ago, describing an unplanned bite during a scenario that had gone outside its parameters. The report was real. Joy had written part of it herself, but those 2 paragraphs, removed from their context, removed from the 12 pages that surrounded and resolved them, read like a warning that had been ignored. The article did not mention the outcome. It did not mention the bite had occurred in a controlled exercise. It mentioned a local veterinary behaviorist, a name Joy didn't recognize, who spoke in general terms about breed risks in civilian environments. She put the article down, wrote the behaviorist's name in her notebook, underlined it. By 9, 3 other outlets had linked to it. The video's comment section had shifted not entirely, but a new current had entered it. If the dog bit someone before, why is it still certified? And just because she has paperwork doesn't mean the dogs are safe. And 1. From an account created that morning with no prior history, someone needs to look into how she got that federal contract in the first place. Joy read that last one twice. Set her phone down, looked at the wall. Garrett called at 10. The behaviorist they quoted, he testified in 2 other cases in the last 18 months. Both involved animals whose owners were contesting municipal seizure orders. He testified for the municipality both times. Who retained him for this? Still working on that. A pause. There's something else. Yesterday afternoon, a city council member introduced a proposed amendment to Municipal Code 714B. It would expand the definition of public safety threat to include any animal with a documented bite history, regardless of context. And it would allow municipal authorities to supersede federal handler certifications where local safety concerns are deemed. He paused, reading credibly substantiated by sworn officer testimony. Joy was quiet. That's very specific language. It applies to exactly one situation currently active in this jurisdiction. Garrett said. She looked at her timeline. She understood the architecture. The article created public doubt. The amendment created legal cover. The civil filing was already in motion. 3 instruments, each legitimate in isolation, each doing a different part of the same job. Not rushed, not improvised. The work of people who knew how to use systems the way other people used tools. Renata called at 11. "I've been following the developments this morning," she said. Her voice was measured, and underneath that, a controlled anger Joy recognized because she had felt it herself and learned long ago to keep it below the surface where it was useful. "I think we should meet." "Yes," Joy said. "Today, if possible." "This afternoon," Joy said. "I have something to finish first." She ended the call, looked at the table, the timeline, the filing, the notebook. She picked up her pen, turned to a fresh page. At the top, she wrote one question. Small and plain, who made the call. Then she started writing. Small, precise handwriting. The kind that meant she was not thinking about how she felt. She was thinking about what came next. The meeting with Renata lasted 3 hours. They sat at a conference table on the 4th floor of the Advocacy Center. Just the 2 of them. With Joy's notebook and the civil filing and Marcus's printed pages and Sylvia's USB drive arranged between them like a map of something that had been invisible until now. Renata read without interrupting. She made her own notes in the margins of a yellow legal pad. She asked 3 questions in 3 hours, each one precise, each one directed at a specific gap in the documentation rather than the overall shape of it. When she finished, she set her pen down and looked at the table for a moment. "The amendment language," she said. "The specific phrasing about superseding federal certification through sworn officer testimony." She paused. "That language came from somewhere. It didn't originate with the council member." Joy waited. "Language like that gets drafted by someone who knows what they need it to do. That's not a city council staffer. That's outside counsel." Renata looked at Joy. "The same firm listed on your civil filing." Joy nodded once. She had reached the same conclusion the night before, but had wanted someone else to arrive at it independently. Renata pulled the civil filing toward her and turned to the last page, looked at the firm name. "I know their work," she said quietly. "I've seen them in 3 other jurisdictions. Always the same structure, civil pressure, legislative cover, public narrative, always on behalf of a municipal contractor." She set the filing down. "Who holds the animal control contract in this city?" Joy opened her notebook to the page she had written Thursday morning. After the article, after Garrett's call, after an hour of public records she had pulled from the city's procurement database. She turned it so Renata could read it. Renata read it, read it again, sat back in her chair. "They lost the federal K-9 bid 14 months ago." "Yes," Joy said. "To the program that issued my certification." Renata was quiet for a long moment. "And your route? Callaway Street? The parking lot?" She looked at Joy. "You've been running that route for 14 months. "Since I relocated," Joy said. After the contract was awarded. The room held that fact for a moment without either of them speaking. Garrett's information arrived by email at 4:17 while they were still at the table. Joy's phone buzzed once, and she read it and turned the screen so Renata could see. It was a single document, 2 pages, internal correspondence from the certifying agency, obtained through a contact Garrett had not named. It showed the file pull from 8 weeks ago. It showed the request origin. And below that, in the metadata that the person who made the request had apparently not thought to clear, it showed the IP address from which the request had been submitted and the organizational account to which that address was registered. The account belonged to the law firm. Renata read it twice. Set the phone down carefully. The way you set something down when you want to be sure it stays where you put it. That's not informal anymore, she said. That's a paper trail. But it was Garrett's second message, arriving 11 minutes later. That changed the shape of everything. He had pulled the dispatch records, not through official channels, through a contact at the communications center, someone who owed him a conversation and had agreed to look at one specific log entry without asking why. The dispatch record for Tuesday morning showed a call placed to the non-emergency line at 6:51 a.m., an anonymous tip. A report of 2 aggressive animals in the Callaway Street area, handler unknown, believed to be a public safety concern. The call had been logged, flagged, and routed to Orser's unit within 4 minutes. Joy looked at the timestamp. She had left her house at 6:58 a.m. She knew this because she had a habit, built over years of military routine, of noting her departure time. It was in her phone, a 7-second voice memo she made each morning before she opened the front door. A discipline she had maintained so long it had stopped feeling like a discipline and had just become part of leaving. The call had been placed 7 minutes before she walked out her door. She looked at that number 7 minutes and felt something settle in her chest that was not quite relief and not quite anger, but was in the same neighborhood as both. She had known, since Wednesday night, that Tuesday morning had not been accidental. She had built the case for that conclusion piece by piece across 4 days of careful documentation. But knowing a thing and seeing it confirmed in a timestamp are different experiences. And for a moment, she simply sat with the difference. Renata was looking at her. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Joy said. It was true. She picked up her pen, turned to the last used page in her notebook, the one from Thursday morning with the single question at the top: who made the call? Below it, in the same small, precise handwriting, she wrote the answer. Not a name yet. A role. A position. The elected official whose campaign had received, across 3 separate donation cycles, a combined total of $340,000 from the parent company of the municipal contractor who had lost the federal K-9 bid 14 months ago. The official who sat on the city's public safety subcommittee. The official who had made 3 calls to the law firm in the 10 days preceding Tuesday morning. According to phone records that were technically public and practically invisible unless you knew to look for them. She wrote it down, closed the notebook, set her pen beside it. Renata looked at the closed notebook for a moment. Then she looked at Joy. "This is enough," she said. Not triumphant, just factual. The way someone says a thing when they have been in enough rooms to know what enough looks like. "Not yet," Joy said. "One more thing." She opened her phone, found the voice memo from Tuesday morning, 6:58 a.m., 7 seconds long. Her own voice saying the time and the date and the weather before she opened the door. She played it once. The sound of it was small and ordinary in the conference room. Her voice, the date, and in the background, barely audible. The sound of 2 dogs rising from their positions and moving toward the door because they had heard her pick up her keys. She set the phone on the table between them. Renata looked at it, then at Joy. Then she understood. "The memo timestamps your departure," she said, "which means the call to dispatch was placed before you were outside, before you were visible, before anyone on the street could have seen the dogs." She paused. "Whoever made that call knew your schedule." "Yes," Joy said. Outside the window. The afternoon had gone long and gold, the kind of late light that makes ordinary streets look like something else entirely. Joy looked at it for a moment. Then she picked up her pen one more time and opened her notebook to the very first page, not the timeline, not the columns, but the page she had filled Tuesday night, still in her running clothes, at her kitchen table, when the civil filing had just arrived and the video was still climbing, and she had sat down and started, quietly, to count. At the top of that first page, in the same small handwriting, she had written one line before anything else, a habit, a discipline, the way she began every serious piece of work. What do I actually know? She looked at it for a long moment. Then she drew a single line through it, not erasing it, marking it complete, and beneath it, in the space that remained, she wrote 4 words that were not a question. Enough. Now we move. She closed the notebook, looked at Renata. "Make the calls," she said. Renata picked up her phone. The same parking lot, the same Tuesday morning, the same stretch of Calloway Street where the sidewalk cracked near the fire hydrant and the oak trees made a ceiling of shade. Joy ran through it without slowing down. Zeus on her left, Ares on her right. No cruisers parked diagonal, no one waiting, just pavement and morning light and the quiet rhythm of 3 things moving together like they always had. Orser's badge was gone by Friday. The amendment never made it to a vote. The official resigned before the investigation became public. Some things end loudly. This one didn't. Power doesn't always announce when it shifts. But it shifts. Stories like this one happen more than they get recorded. Most of them don't have a video. Most of them don't have a Sylvia with a porch camera, or a Garrett with the right contact, or a timestamp that told the truth before anyone could change it. Most of them just happen. And then they're over. And the person it happened to goes home and lives with it quietly. This one got written down. Not all of them do.